right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining another edition of Agile Takes. We take a few minutes just to talk about the hot topics around cybersecurity. I am thrilled to be joined today by Jason Hill. Jason, thanks for joining us. I've been looking forward to chatting with you.
Thanks for having me, Tony. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. Jason, one of the big things I think people are seeing these days is cybersecurity globally has a resource problem, right? It's either not enough people or the people might not have the skill sets. You have a very diverse background, so we'd love to hear a little bit about it, coming out of the military, being an actual experienced, certified, ethical hacker. I mean, you're trying to think like the bad guys, which is hard when you're a good guy. I understand that. But talk a little bit about that role, because when you look at folks getting into the industry, people who have those skill sets or want those skill sets can either go good or bad. And we want them to go good, but a lot of them do go bad. So let's talk about some of those skill sets and what you think some of those qualities are that would make a tremendous, person to get to that type of role.
Yeah, sure. So as you said, I spent the last 23 years in the Virginia National Guard doing some cyber work, being a hands-on operator, a red teamer, or pen tester. I also ran some of the teams over at CISA doing the exact same thing. So I have a unique position to see where a lot of the workforce comes from and what it takes to be one of the good guys, as you pointed out. I think it's a wonderful place to be in. It's a wonderful job to have. And I always tell people one of the best things that you can come with when you're getting into this type of work is passion, right? So I've run across many people who I've hired over the years who have had master's degrees, undergrad degrees, and some that have only had high school degrees. And in one case, one person who actually had a GED that actually worked I worked alongside of. But the one thing that was common across all of those different diverse backgrounds, educational backgrounds, was the amount of passion that those people brought. When it comes to the type of work that we do, it's ever changing. The adversary is constantly changing. And in the pen testing case, I guess an adversary would be, the blue team or the defenders. But even in the pen testing, even in the other part of the pen testing case, it could be the adversary that's a nation state. And so they're constantly changing their tools, tactics, and procedures on how they do things. And if it's constantly evolving, as a pen tester, you have to stay up on those types of TTPs that happen. And really, the only way that you can do it is by being passionate about what you do. There's a lot of late hours. There's a lot of unpaid hours that happen in our world. And if you have that passion, it doesn't feel like work, and you can evolve your career quickly that way. Yeah. So I would say passion is probably the number one thing that I would look for in a pen tester as a positive trait.
No, it's a great point. I listened to a couple of security podcasts, one of them being Malicious Life. I don't know if you listened to that one, but when they profile hackers, the two things that really stick out for me are passion, 100%. And number two is they got started young. Yeah. Right? Like they were playing around with maybe trying to break into their school to screw their grades up, or just show that they can. Maybe they weren't being malicious, but maybe prove they can. And that's where a lot of them get started, right? Like hacking the school, because it's kind of easy, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know, when you think about young people coming up, the passion's one thing. Is it critical to have, a computer science background, mathematics? Like, what do you think from a education perspective, or I guess from a brilliance perspective, outside of passion is key?
Yeah. So again, a lot of the folks that I've worked with and have worked for me in the past have come from a wide range of backgrounds, educational backgrounds. I've had folks that have worked for me who were mechanical engineers before they came over to the ethical hacking side of the house. People who were paper pencil mathematicians. That was how this person described themselves. And I've had folks that have known what they've wanted to do since like you said, since they became self-aware and learned what a computer was. And I would, again, take passion out of play and you need some sort of analytical mindset, right? And so whatever educational background you have, if it tends to lean towards analytical, That's the kind of mindset, that's the kind of training that we tend to look for. And funny, when you think about it, folks that come from like a mechanic background, those guys are great, right? I've had a guy that worked for me who was a mechanic previously in his life, and he loved solving the problems
Right.
as a mechanic. And I think that's where any type of education background or job background that you've had in the past, where you've had to use, analytics or analyzing a problem or troubleshooting something to figure out how something works, to figure out how to take something apart and put it back together again. I think there's a wide range of educational backgrounds and mindsets that can come into the ethical hacking world, as long as you like to analyze and solve problems.
Yeah.
I think those are the secondary traits. When you think about from an educational background specifically, I think having a CS degree is good. I don't have one. I am one of the worst programmers on the planet. I like to dabble and build tools that make my life easier, but I would never share them with anyone because they're awful. So CS backgrounds are very good because there is an element of programming in pen testing. Any type of computer background or computer work. I spent, before I was a full-time ethical hacker, I spent 15 years doing just IT work, which gave me, a lot of knowledge for how things worked. So that made it easier to, break those things later in life. So I think that's where I would point to outside of passion, but ultimately passion being the number one trait that I'm always looking for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm going to challenge you on recording here as the worst hacker. My first programming job was I had to develop a calculator, and it didn't calculate. So the plus didn't work, the minus didn't work, like nothing worked. So pretty much realized I am not a good programmer. And like you, because I think you're fantastic talking to customers, talking to technical people, talking to non-technical people. That's a tremendous trait. There's guys who can't, guys and women who can't do that, and they're tremendous at what they do.
Mhm.
Some kind of come, this way in the profession. So as you think about red teams or blue teams, you think about ethical hackers, you think about hackers who maybe some who are not so ethical, or maybe doing it just for money, or maybe just to be mischievous. What are some of the misconceptions maybe about this type of profession? Or about the types of folks who do go into this type of role?
One of the big misconceptions is that you kind of need to be both of those personalities that you mentioned. I've coming up through the years, I've met folks that are incredible hackers or incredible defenders, right? And they're so good at what they do. That skill is so honed that maybe explaining things to people in the business world or people who aren't part of that world, they may have a hard time doing that, right? And what I mean by a hard time is not necessarily explaining what they do, because they can explain what they do in elegant detail. But if the person they're talking to doesn't understand anything that they're saying, then the message gets lost in translation. I think it's very rare to find folks who can do both, right? Who can take that technical knowledge and explain it in terms of the intended audience. And what I mean by that is, in some cases, you may be talking to, in ethical hacking or pen testing, you may be talking to the CEO of a bank, which may want to hear something different than the CEO of a hospital or the CEO of manufacturing. They may want whatever is important to that audience. You need to be able to figure out how to explain what you did in order in a way that makes sense to them, in a way that touches on the things that they care about, right? Because in the end, the penetration testing is kind of the same across the board, depending on the targets and the systems that you're working against, but how you relay that information to the people that need to hear it in a way that they need to hear it is a skill and a trait that has to be worked on constantly in our profession. So I would just say, that's something that takes years to do and to develop. It's a big misconception, I would say, that you have to do those things, right? That you have to be good in both. I think, if you don't have the well-rounded skills to do all of it, it's okay. You can build those skills as you move through your career. You can learn those skills from one side or the other. And then for the other side, I think, and the other side being, the folks that hire ethical hackers that don't know anything about it. Just because you have a person who can't, get the message across to you doesn't mean that they're not good. Or
That's right.
on the flip side of that is, if they're not talking about the most technical things on the planet, doesn't mean that they can't do, those technical things as well. So
Yeah.
those would be one of the big ones. And then to wrap that up, Tony, I told you I would talk about that other piece that you mentioned. I think one of the other biggest misconceptions is that hacking is just like the movies. And what I mean by that is
Is
that
anything like the movies? Anything?
yeah, no, I don't think that I've ever typed side by side on a single keyboard with another person before to hack into anything. Nor have we ever had really awesome looking graphics for when I'm logging into the whatever government agency it is. But it's not as glamorous and easy. Easy is the word. Glamorous, that begs
At all.
a question, right? But I think it's not as easy as it comes off in an hour-and-a-half movie or a 30-minute television show, and that it's hard. It takes hard work, a lot of those analytical skills and frustrations, and it takes a lot of stick-to-itiveness, if you will, to gain access. So what the one thing that I see that folks do is when they fail, they quit. And that's, you've got to have that. I think that's what makes folks successful. So my parting shot is stick to it. Don't be afraid to fail and just push hard.
That's great.
Jason, I'll go in there.
This is fantastic. I love it. I think that feedback is tremendous. I really appreciate you taking some time. I know how busy you are. So thank you so much for doing this. If anybody has any questions for Jason, you can reach out to us at agileblue.com and we'll get your questions answered.
Yeah,
Jason, have a great day. Thanks for this.
Yeah.